I'll sign everybody.
Oh, goodness.
I think somebody got stuck in the elevator.
Oh, no. It's probably Johnny, I'm guessing.
As I kept pushing the button, it kept turning it off. And I was like, okay, I'm not gonna wait.
Okay, so this is what stimulants do, and we need to keep thinking about this because people die using uppers, using snorting cocaine, shooting up with crystal meth. People die. So why in the world did they die? Well, stimulants increase the activity in your central nervous system. It boosts your energy. It raises your heart rate and your blood pressure. And this is usually where the death comes from. It blows your heart out. It raises your blood pressure to the extent that you have a stroke. So these people stroke out a lot. Even if they don't stroke out when they are using it, it weakens their blood vessels. Weakens their blood vessels in their heart. It weakens the blood vessels in their brains, and so they're more susceptible to strokes. So these individuals that were smoking a lot, or that were snorting a lot of cocaine back in the 80s and 90s, a lot of these people are dead, and they died of strokes. They died of strokes in their 60s, in their late 50s, early 60s, and now they're dead. Robin Williams. Well, we won't talk about Robin Williams, but this is the reason why. It increases your respiration, of course. That's not going to kill you. Reduces your appetite. Some of these people do become anorexic, and it subdues your thirst. So those are the things that it does. It does positive things to you, of course. It makes you more alert. It makes you more active. It makes you more confident. Unfortunately, some of the negative things, it makes you more anxious to the point of paranoia. It makes you restless, and it sometimes makes people aggressive. And of course, last time I was telling you about the guy that was shut up with crystal meth, walking along the street, came across a baseball bat, picked it up. The next guy he saw, he beat to death with a baseball bat. Didn't know the guy, had no clue who he was. He just did it, and he claimed that it was the crystal meth that made him do it. That he wouldn't have, and normally he wouldn't have done it. And the reality is, probably he wouldn't have beat the man to death with a baseball bat if he had been sober. But of course he wasn't. He was under the influence of crystal meth. Stimulants are used to treat narcolepsy because narcolepsy, these individuals drop into REM sleep instantaneously. We can use it to combat obesity. As a matter of fact, the diet pills that people took in the 70s and 80s were all amphetamines, and of course it's used to treat ADHD as well. Stimulants work by affecting 4 neurotransmitters. It increases your epinephrine level, which increases your energy. It increases your norepinephrine level, which gives you more confidence and feelings of well-being and motivation. It increases your serotonin, which also increases your energy level, and it increases your dopamine. And of course, dopamine makes you feel really good, and that increases your energy as well. Most of the neurons affected by epinephrine and norepinephrine are located in an area of the midbrain called the locus ceruleus. Locus ceruleus is right here, this little lump of stuff right there. This portion of the brain networks with many parts of the rest of the brain, and it tells the brain that good things are happening. When the body needs an extra jolt of energy, epinephrine and norepinephrine are released to provide the energy. So you get an adrenaline rush when you need it. When the individual takes uppers, it forces the release of the energy chemicals. These drugs cause the body to react to stress that doesn't exist and makes the individual talkative, hyperactive, and hypervigilant. And of course, I have a picture of Barney Fife up here because when he got excited, he was talkative, he was hyperactive, and he was hypervigilant. I thought he fit with. So maybe Barney Fife was actually on crystal meth or something. The stronger the stimulant, the longer it takes the body to recover. Large quantities over long periods of time deplete the body's energy stores and leaves the body without reserves. So if you've ever seen a speed freak, which I hope you never have, if you've seen people that have been using crystal meth for an extended length of time, usually they are skinny, very, very skinny, and sometimes extremely talkative. I went to Bosch's, this was last semester, I went to Bosch's, and this guy came up to me, and he went, "Get this down, I mean, he wasn't speaking Navajo, he wasn't speaking anything at all, but he couldn't control what he was saying. And he just came up to me, and he had these big eyes, and he wanted money, is what he wanted. And I kept saying, "I don't understand what you're talking about, I don't understand what you're saying." And finally he left, but he couldn't control anything. He was just like speaking in tongues or something. It's really kind of fascinating. Withdrawal from stimulants can create severe depression that can last for days, for weeks, or for months. And if you've ever been around speed freaks, of course, they do not have any body fat on their bodies. They can't have any body fat. They're not really eating very well. They're staying up all night, and they're freaked out. They're just freaked out. And when they come off this stuff, and this was a problem, we would get these speed freaks in the hospital. They'd come in with an overdose or something. They go into the emergency room. We send them upstairs, and they would almost immediately go into depression. And of course, we would have to send them to the psych ward after that. So we knew that the speed freaks, as soon as we cured these individuals, or we took care of their immediate problem, that probably they were going to end up in the psych ward. People tend to build up a fairly rapid tolerance to stimulant, forcing the individual to consume more and more of the substance. Even coffee will require more and more with increased consumption. And of course, we see that with caffeine drinkers. Individual that was drinking one Monster, now all of a sudden they need 2 Monsters a day in order just to function.
No caffeine today.
Yeah, we're kind of empty. I guess we're missing Johnny. Crystal's got a new job, so she'll probably be doing this mostly online. But Johnny's the only one who's really missing. So it's the 4 of us, or 5 of us, I guess. We'll count Crystal. We have to count Crystal. The reward reinforcement pathway is a natural structure that informs the individual of an activity or substance that supports survival. Hunger satiation tells you when you're no longer hungry. It tells you when you're no longer thirsty. It tells you when your sexual desire is finally satiated. When a strong stimulant is used, it overstimulates the reward reinforcement pathway, and the body doesn't respond to hunger, thirst, or sexual activity. The brain cannot be satisfied. At this stage, it cannot be satisfied, as curious as that is. I was watching a movie last night. It was about the rape and murder of an individual. She was kind of a prostitute. She's kind of a mistress. And she liked to be strangled. Hypoxia. Hypoxia, erotic hypoxia, where they cut off your airways, and they create I don't know what it creates. Anyway, a lot of people like this kind of stuff. They like the hypoxia thing. And that's the way that she got off, was by being strangled. But of course, she'd taken speed before she started having sex. And when they did the autopsy, she was killed, of course. When they did the autopsy, they said that her sexual parts were raw to the point of being very painful. But of course, she was on speed. She was on amphetamines, and she couldn't be satisfied as far as that goes. Anyway, they strangled her. Kind of an interesting movie. It's about the Japanese. It's called Rising Sun. The sun is rising. It's got Wesley Snipes and Sean Connery. Really fascinating movie. As more and more of the stimulant is used, tolerance builds and the rush in stimulation diminishes. But what does remain is the emotional memory of the effect of the stimulant. This is accomplished by the dopamine stimulation and the reward reinforcement pathway. So you remember what it's supposed to feel like, even though it didn't feel like that. One of the side effects of long-term stimulant usage can be dehydration and malnourishment. And of course, we see that all the time. Unfortunately, when you suffer from dehydration, it messes up your gums. So a lot of times individuals that are speed freaks have really bad teeth, or their teeth have fallen out completely because of the mass dehydration and malnourishment. You really need to eat a balanced diet in order to maintain your teeth. The hypothalamus regulates thirst and hunger, of course, and you're overstimulating the hypothalamus. Stimulants fool this part of the brain to think that the individual is neither hungry nor thirsty. This can lead to deficiencies of vitamins and minerals, as well as damage to the teeth, of course. You need to take in substances in order to maintain your teeth. Stimulants, including weaker ones like nicotine and caffeine, induce vascular spasm and constrict blood flow to organs and tissue. Heavy smokers will have a pasty complexion due to restricted blood flow. They look like they're almost cadaverous. They look like they're almost dead. This restricted blood flow will slow tissue repair and healing process. So if you know somebody that's a smoker and they smoke a lot of times it takes them a long time to heal. Now, of course, this mirrors diabetes. Diabetes, of course, when you develop diabetes, it slows down the healing process in your body. So somebody who's a diabetic that smokes, they may never heal. They may get a wound that just will not go away. Chronic use of stimulants will weaken blood vessels, increasing the risk of stroke, of course, and this is one of the reasons why all those guys that were so cool and snorting cocaine back in the 80s and 90s are now potentially no longer with us because of a stroke. Not a whole lot you can do about a stroke. But at least the stimulant user has increased confidence and stimulated feelings of euphoria. They are talkative, of course, they're restless, they're irritable, they don't sleep, they have insomnia, and unfortunately this causes paranoia, aggression, and sometimes violence. Prolonged use of high doses of methamphetamines can lead to clinical levels of paranoia or kick the individual into psychosis. And I talk about this from time to time. I had my one student she started using crystal meth again. She'd go off, and then they sent her to jail. She had to go off crystal meth. So by the time she got out of jail, she was almost normal again. And then something would happen. She'd find an excuse to use crystal meth, and she would suddenly she started having psychotic episodes. The one time she thought she was, well, I told you the story. She thought that she was Hispanic and that her father had murdered her mother. And as it turned out, her father had actually died and her mother was still alive. But they dug up somebody's backyard because and of course she's speaking Spanish, even though she doesn't speak Spanish. Well, she wasn't, they brought a translator in, they said that he couldn't understand. It must be an Indian dialect from Mexico. It's really kind of interesting. What did she have to do with Mexico? Nothing. She was Alaskan, okay? She was an Aleut from Alaska. And she was Grovan. It's really kind of funny. And they thought she was Mexican. Meth increases the dopamine in the central nervous system. One of the conditions of schizophrenia is an overabundance of dopamine receptor sites, of course. Sometimes the meth user will drift into permanent schizophrenia. And of course, this is one of the problems with using uppers. Nicotine provides almost immediate tolerance. All stimulants in the slower but similar manner develop tolerance rapidly. Dependence is developed with tolerance since the need becomes greater and greater. Nicotine has the strongest dependence level, and for that reason, it is the most addictive substance known to man. Cocaine is synthesized from the coca leaf. Since its introduction in South America with the invasion of the Incas in Peru, it has enjoyed epidemics and lag periods. The first epidemic was at the end of the 19th century. We had a cocaine epidemic it was in the cool people. Only the cool people used cocaine. Freud was one of the individuals that used cocaine. The famous author Robert Louis Stevenson wrote the novel The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in 6 days while taking cocaine as a treatment for tuberculosis. Eventually, Robert Louis Stevenson would die of tuberculosis. And he died in Hawaii, if I'm not mistaken. But he was being treated for tuberculosis with cocaine. Many have speculated that the two personalities represented in the novel actually represented Stevenson on and off cocaine. Stevenson may have written the novel to explain to friends his change of personality. He was far more talkative when he was using cocaine, and he actually was far more aggressive than he normally was. And if you've ever seen the movie or watched or read the book, of course, Mr. Hyde is a monster that kills people. Cocaine won't grow just anywhere like marijuana does. You can grow marijuana. We could grow marijuana right here if we wanted to. As long as we turned on the lights, we could grow marijuana. Cocaine, of course, doesn't grow just anywhere. It only grows in the high slopes of the Andes Mountains. So we can find cocaine grows in Peru, in Bolivia, in Ecuador, in Colombia, and it will actually grow in Indonesia, on Java in Indonesia. It will grow on that island because it needs moisture and it needs elevation in order to grow. Coca leaves don't contain very much alkaloid cocaine. 1 acre of 6 to 8 foot bushes will only produce 1.5 to 2 kilograms of cocaine. That's about 3 to 4.5 pounds of cocaine. And this is a whole acre of cocaine bushes. Cocaine refinement begins with stage 1. They soak the leaves in alkali and water. First they pick the leaves and they soak them in alkali and water. Stage 2 of cocaine refinement is where the workers add gasoline or acetone or kerosene to create a paste. As you can see, these are all highly flammable. So this is a very dangerous stage. If it starts on fire, of course, it can explode. Gasoline, acetone, or kerosene, I'm sorry. Stage 3 involves discarding the waste leaves and adding an acid like hydrochloric or sulfuric acid. So a lot of times when we see a processor of cocaine, we see burns on this individual. Well, it's either from the gasoline, kerosene, or acetone, or it's from the acid that they have to use in order to break down the paste. Stage 4 of the cocaine paste is mixed with lime and ammonia. The last stage is separating the cocaine hydrochloride from the paste, and of course that produces the powder. You can take the powder and make it into solid pieces like that are called rocks. Smuggling cocaine into the United States has been a constant cat and mouse game between the smugglers and the DEA since the 1970s. Drug Enforcement Agency. The DEA got some help from the military. And this was during the Reagan administration. During the Reagan administration, a friend of the president's was killed by smugglers. They stole his yacht, and they used his yacht to smuggle cocaine into the United States after they killed him and all of his family. At that point, Reagan tasked the United States Air Force and the United States Navy and the United States Coast Guard to start doing drug interdiction. And at that stage, of course, the Air Force was flying around Colombia trying to pick up airplane flights of cocaine smugglers. The Navy, of course, was out in the middle of the ocean. The Coast Guard was patrolling the coast, looking for these ships. This is actually a submarine that one of the cartels bought, and they were going to smuggle cocaine into the United States using a submarine. As odd as that sounds. Since the military has joined the fight against drugs, they've stopped a lot of these mass shipments coming into the United States. Today there's only one sure route into the United States, and that is along the porous border with Mexico. Colombian drug cartels smuggle about 2/3 of their product in this manner across the border. The last third continues to come over by sea, and of course that's by ship. Very difficult to deal with those select individuals. North America consumes about 40 to 50% of the world's cocaine. So we are the problem. We as Americans are the problem. It is estimated that Americans spent $36.1 billion on cocaine in 2004. $36.1 billion. Of course, if it has to do with money, then the United States is interested. So there are a lot of people that make a lot of money in the United States. There was a cocaine transfer going on between Mexico and Chicago. There was a route that they would take, and they would use the interstates. They would take a semi, or they would have some kind of a truck, and they are shipping cocaine from Mexico to Chicago. El Chapo was the guy that was doing this, and he's the one that had created the routes. He's the one that had created the smugglers up in Chicago to process his cocaine. And El Chapo has been captured. He was arrested in Mexico, and he was extradited to the United States. So now it looks like El Chapo is not going to be smuggling into the United States anymore. So did that stop the cocaine usage in Chicago? No. The whole process is still intact. The only difference is the lead guy is gone, and now he's been replaced by somebody else. But there's still a lot of cocaine in Chicago. Cocaine in the United States averages 84% purity, with prices ranging from $12,000 to $35,000 per kilogram. That's about 2.2 pounds is what a kilogram is. There are 1,000 grams in a kilogram. The street value of 1 gram of cocaine is $50 to $200, with an average purity of about 57%. So you're not, if you're snorting cocaine, you're not really snorting just cocaine. You're also snorting, I don't know, baby powder, powdered sugar. It could be just about anything. We all know about them mixing their cocaine and their crystal meth, cutting their crystal meth and their heroin and their cocaine with elephant tranquilizer down around the Cincinnati area. And of course that killed all kinds of people. All the people snorting cocaine, and all the people shooting up with crystal meth, and all the people shooting up with heroin. Crack cocaine comes in rocks of 1/10 of a gram to 1/2 of a gram, and it sells for $10 to $20 per rock. And of course, this is just solidified cocaine powder is all it is. Hardcore cocaine users will spend an average of $186 per week on cocaine. Cocaine is actually cheaper than it ever has been because they're smuggling so much into the United States. It's estimated that there are probably over 3 million hardcore cocaine users in the United States. This is a TV pitchman by the name of Billy Mays. He died back in 2007 of a massive heart attack. And the reason he had a heart attack was because he was a heavy cocaine user. And of course, if you ever heard him on television, you'd swear that this guy that's yelling at me is, there's something going on with this guy. And as it turned out, there was something going on with him. He was a cocaine user. I know. When the Spanish first arrived in South America, they found many people in the Andes Mountains chewing coca leaves. They were chewing on these leaves, and then they could work massive hours. They could work for 2 days straight without any rest. Most Incan users actually mix the juice with lime from ground shell or ash to accelerate the introduction of alkaloid into the brain. Introduction occurs in 3 to 5 minutes. So you start chewing this stuff, you make a paste in your mouth, you take seashells or you take ashes from a fire, and it will break down the coca leaves so that the alkaloid will actually get into your brain. It takes about 3 to 5 minutes. When we were in Peru, there was one individual that bought coca leaves right off the plane. He was ready to try this stuff out and see if it really worked. Of course, he didn't know about the alkaloid stuff, so he's chewing this stuff, and nothing's happening. Got real pissed off. Said that these weren't real coca leaves, it must be something else. Then somebody told him, well, you need to put baking soda in your mouth as well. And then he got a little bit of a rush. I guess it wasn't much of one. The conquistadores encouraged use of coca to increase the productivity of their Quichua workers. So if you go down to Peru, you go down to Bolivia or Colombia, the natives in that area speak a language called Quichua. And the Quichua, of course, is the natives of the area. In 1859, Albert Newman isolated the active ingredient in coca leaves, cocaine hydrochloride. Isolated, this substance was 200 times more powerful by weight than the coca leaf. The drug was first used as an anesthetic and a medicine to treat depression, tuberculosis, gastric disorder, and asthma. And of course, it was Freud that used it to treat depression. It's really kind of hard to be depressed when you're all stoked out on cocaine. Until you, of course, come off the cocaine, and then you're even more depressed than you were before. Cocaine wine was popular in France and Italy in the late 1860s. This ushered in the first modern cocaine epidemic, as 2 glasses of wine delivered the same amount of cocaine as a line of coke. It took 15 to 30 minutes for the cocaine to take effect after ingesting in this manner. And of course, this cocaine wine, the coca wine that they talk about, was a really serious problem. People were becoming addicted, not just to the alcohol, but also to the cocaine in the alcohol. By the 1880s, patented medicines and drinks began to appear laced with cocaine, opium, morphine, heroin, cannabis, and alcohol. Since no one really understood addiction or the real power of the supplements in their tonics, many people became addicted. And a lot of women used these laced drinks. They became addicted. If you've ever watched the play or the movie Oklahoma, at one point she drinks a substance and then she has a hallucination. And of course, it was one of these patented drinks that she was taking in the movie or the play Oklahoma. People began introducing cocaine into their systems in new ways. Injecting intravenously introduces the drug into the system in 30 seconds. Snorting cocaine introduces the substance into the blood in 2 to 5 minutes. Snorting more cocaine is counterproductive. So the thing about cocaine is it's kind of like LSD. If you take LSD, you take a hit of LSD, you're going to have a reaction. If you take more LSD, you're not going to have more of a reaction. Cocaine's kind of the same way. If you're snorting cocaine, how much cocaine can you snort? Well, if you snort a line of cocaine up your right nostril, then you can snort a second line of cocaine up your left nostril. But if you snort cocaine up your right nostril again, nothing's going to happen. Cocaine is a vasoconstrictor. And since it's a vasoconstrictor, it closes up the nasal passages, the nasal passage. So one of the cool things about snorting cocaine is that after you snort and after you come down, after your nasal passages are no longer constricted, all of a sudden you'll get your nose will start running, which is always cool. And you'll start sniffling, which is always cool as well. I think when Trump was making his speeches and he kept sniffing, it was so cool, don't you? It was so neat, all that sniffling and whatnot, snuffling and sniffling. The other thing that happens is sometimes you can destroy your blood vessels in your nose. We know of individuals that had to have their noses reconstructed because they snorted so much cocaine. Linda Ronstadt had to have her nose reconstructed twice. The cartilage died. Why did the cartilage die? Well, cartilage is living tissue. And when you snort cocaine, it's a vasoconstrictor. So she was cutting off the blood supply into her nose. If you snort enough cocaine, then potentially the cartilage in your nose is going to die. And that's exactly what happened to her. If you look at pictures of Linda Ronstadt through the years, one of the things you see is her nose suddenly the cartilage would start dying and her nose would start getting more and more pug-like. So she started looking like a pig. And then of course she'd have reconstructive surgery, her nose would be fine, and then all of a sudden it would start dissolving again. She'd have to have it reconstructed again. Linda Ronstadt no longer makes music. Linda Ronstadt suffers from Parkinson's disease. Was it induced by the cocaine that she snorted? Probably. Michael J. Fox. has Parkinson's disease. He was susceptible to Parkinson's disease anyway, but it was probably the cocaine that he snorted when he was first a popular actor that created his Parkinson's disease. He developed Parkinson's disease in his 30s. That just doesn't happen unless something else is going on. Okay, so what are we talking about? Snorting more cocaine is counterproductive. I already talked about that. As the cocaine wears off, of course, your nasal passage opens up and you start, your nose starts running. Smoking cocaine-laced cigarettes were introduced in 1914, but the high temperature of the cigarettes destroyed most of the psychoactive substance, so smoking cocaine-laced cigarettes didn't make any sense. Because cocaine is a natural substance, it tends to be metabolized very quickly, and its effect dissipates much faster than synthetic stimulants. For this reason, for a long time, people thought that cocaine wasn't addictive because it metabolized too rapidly. You got it out of your system too fast. The half-life of cocaine is 30 to 90 minutes and is detectable in the urine for up to 36 hours after ingestion. Is it an addictive substance? The answer is yes. Cocaine is used as a topical anesthetic because of its powerful vasoconstriction capabilities. Since cocaine receptors are found in the smooth muscles of the lungs, cocaine use will cause the bronchi to dilate. Okay. And that, since it cuts off your circulation, you don't feel anything. It's kind of like putting a tourniquet around your wrist, cuts off your circulation to your hand, and pretty soon your hand goes numb. Well, that's exactly what happens when you use any cocaine in any of its forms as an anesthetic. Synthetic cocaine products mimic the effect of cocaine for eye, dental, and cutaneous surgeries. Lidocaine, you've probably heard of these. Procaine, lidocaine, xylocaine, or Novocaine. These are all the canes. They are all synthetic. They are the things that if you need dental surgery or any dental treatment, they'll shoot up your nerves with Novocaine. If you have surgery on your hand, they'll use lidocaine or xylocaine. Why does it work? Because it cuts off your circulation. If you've ever watched, the movie I was watching last night, there was, the guy had cocaine. And of course people were snorting their cocaine, and they were trying to determine if it was cocaine or not. So he took some of the dust, some of the cocaine dust, or some of the dust of the white powder, and he put it on his gums. Why did he do that? Can you really taste cocaine? Well, yeah, cocaine does have a flavor, but how many people know what it tastes like? What he was trying to do is numb his tongue or numb his gums in order to determine if it was really a cane, if it was really cocaine. Cocaine excites the users by blocking the uptake of neurotransmitter acetylcholine, dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. The abundance of these neurotransmitters gives the individual a feeling of well-being, mastery, omnipotence, euphoria, and general excitement. So individuals, if you're afraid to go in and make a speech, then snorting a line of cocaine makes a whole lot of sense. Because after that you feel, you get a feeling of well-being and mastery, of omnipotence, of euphoria, and you're generally excited. So if you're scared to do something, then you can use this stuff and it'll make you feel like you're on top of the world. Cocaine metabolizes fairly rapidly, leaving the four neurotransmitters vulnerable to reuptake when the cocaine is gone. So the problem is that you have to keep it in your system in order to keep the euphoria going. Cocaine's positive effects will disappear fairly suddenly after about 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how much you've used. This absence of the previous feelings is referred to as the crash and may last for hours, for days, or even weeks for just 5 to 10 minutes of euphoria. Cocaine overstimulates the release of dopamine. If this occurs over time, it triggers the fright center in the brain, causing paranoia. So individuals that snort a lot of cocaine tend to be paranoid, just like marijuana users are paranoid. Cocaine also overstimulates the release of epinephrine and norepinephrine. If this occurs over time, the individual may suffer from lethargy, low blood pressure, and anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure. You feel so good while you're using this stuff. When you're not on it, you feel the opposite. Anhedonia, the inability to feel any pleasure. Now we're going to talk about sex in a minute, and I apologize, but we have to. If we're talking about the stimulants, we have to talk about sex. So I apologize for that. I'm not going to tell. I've got a story, but I'm not going to tell you. I don't want to get in trouble. Doesn't have anything to do with me, okay? If you want to hear it, I'll tell it. We'll take a vote, and if you want to hear the story, I'll tell you the story. It's a really heartbreaker. It'll make you cry, and I don't want to make anybody cry. Okay. Yeah, Edison's back in the background. Oh my God! Don't tell me this story. I don't want to join. Cocaine causes the overstimulation of serotonin, which not only makes the individual happy, but increases sexual activity as well. So remember, people are using this stuff as an aphrodisiac. They're using it so that they can have sex for a longer period of time. If this continues to happen over time, the individual may suffer insomnia, agitation, and severe emotional depression. So the only time you're really happy is while you're snorting the cocaine. When you're off the stuff, you have you get a rebound effect. You get the opposite effect, and it causes insomnia, agitation, and emotional depression. Cocaine blocks the metabolism of acetylcholine, increases alertness, memory and aggression. If overstimulation occurs, and that's misspelled, there's supposed to be 2 R's in there, over time the person may suffer from tremors, memory lapses, mental confusion, and possibly hallucinations. Okay, the tremors. And this is one of the reasons why they didn't diagnose Michael J. Fox right off the bat. They didn't because it causes tremors. So if you've ever been around anybody that's a speed freak or uses crystal meth, they're really agitated when they're not on this stuff. Even when they're on this stuff, they're really agitated. But the rest of the time, they can't control things. They can't control their hands. Their foot pops up and down. It's really kind of bizarre. So that was happening with Michael J. Fox. And they didn't think anything about it. It turned out to be Parkinson's disease, but they thought it was just the after effects of snorting cocaine. Some people actually use cocaine as an aphrodisiac. Since at low doses it enhances sexual desire and it prolongs ejaculation. However, in some cases it causes spontaneous ejaculation, so the individual can't control themselves. In higher doses and with chronic use, cocaine can cause erectile dysfunction and a disinterest in sex. So if you use it in small doses, you're okay. If you use it in heavy doses, all of a sudden, whereas before you're using it as an aphrodisiac, now you're not even interested in sex. The lack of sexual need may lead to high-risk sexual behavior and unusual sexual practices, since sexual need no longer exists for the individual. And so they start doing all kinds of odd shades of gray things. I don't know, what is it? They have that room where it's the pain room, is that what he calls it? Or the torture room? I don't know. And these are the kinds of things that people that snort a lot of cocaine, these are the kinds of things that they will do. They can't get sexually satiated. So these individuals, and they don't have any interest in sex, so they start doing really odd masochistic and sadistic things in order to have any sexual interaction whatsoever. They just get some really bizarre behavior that sometimes turns violent and sometimes is torturous to the other individual having sex with it. Okay. I'm not going to tell you my stories. Do you guys want the story? Do you not want the story? Let's vote. Yes or no? I got a maybe. You don't want to hear it, do you?
It doesn't matter.
You don't? It doesn't matter. Are you okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. It's nothing really big. It's not that big. My first wife left, and when she came back, she was. How can I explain this? All right. The reason she came back was because she was in Indiana. I was stationed down in Texas, and she got on a bus in Indiana and came down to Texas to be with me again. That's what she said. But when she got there, it turned out that she was dealing drugs in Indiana, and she was running away from the cops. And Texas didn't extradite to Indiana. Okay, because, well, there's a reason. Anyway, so when she got down there, And I discovered that she was just there. She wasn't there to be with her children. She wasn't there to be with me. She was there to run away from the police. You know, she tried to get back. She tried to be nice to me, okay, so that she could stay. And I'm an idiot. I'm not real smart, unfortunately. So I didn't kick her out of the house. You know, and she opened her suitcase, and there she's got this whole bag of pills. It's speed is what it is. It was amphetamines, and a bag of marijuana. And so, of course, I'm in the military. If I'm caught with any of this stuff, I get thrown in jail for an extended length of time. And as far as the military is concerned, she's not my wife anymore, but I'm supposed to be able to control the people in my household. And if I can't, then I get into trouble. So I took all the stuff and I threw it away, and she said, oh, you just threw away $10,000 worth of speed or whatever, and $50 worth of marijuana. Oh my God, how can you do that? And then, of course, things went as things went, and she started telling me stories about dealing drugs and everything. But one of the stories she told, she said, me and whoever her supplier is, we had sex all night long. And she said it was wonderful. And of course, both of them were on speed at the time. But evidently, what had happened was that they both took the stuff, and they took too much. And because they took too much, they couldn't be satiated. There was no point of satiation. That's the story I was telling. Okay. And this guy's a little short, ugly guy. I mean, he's shorter than me, okay? And he's this little short, ugly guy. And she's just talking about what a wonderful lover he is, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I'm feeling smaller and smaller and smaller. I know it's a sad, sad story. People say I never tell stories that make me look bad. Well, this one made me look real bad. Eventually, of course, she ran off with somebody else. So, I mean, there is a happy ending to the story. Anyway, she never found the guy again, I guess. I don't know. I don't really care. Anyway, that had to do with speed. They had taken speed, and then they started having sex. And evidently they had sex all night long. And I don't care. I really don't care. I really don't. Please don't repeat that story. It makes me look like an idiot. From cocaine users who are prone to violence, cocaine makes them more aggressive and violent because inhibitory functions are suppressed in the cingulate gyrus and the temporal lobes. Emotional triggers are overstimulated in the amygdala. The fright center is hyperactivated in the limbic system. She may have been lying to me. Let's pretend she was lying, okay? It makes me feel better.
Actually, I think you come out as the better person in this.
I don't know. I'm an idiot for letting her come back.
Well, think about it. I mean, he needed all that extra hand and help.
She needed, yeah, they both needed all that extra help. Yeah, things were a little strange out there.
It wasn't natural, so.
I agree 100%.
There's a different story. There's a difference between natural and.
And then she took
getting
off,
assistance.
and everybody turned out happy. She didn't contaminate my kids with her stupid ideas. Anyway. When cocaine is combined with alcohol, the result is a substance called cocaethylene, which causes increased agitation, euphoria, and violence. Okay, so now we're talking about mixing our drugs, all right? So we're snorting cocaine and drinking alcohol, which is relatively common. Unfortunately, the cocaethylene causes all kinds of interesting problems. In one study of domestic violence, all the perpetrators had used alcohol on the day of the violence. That's why they hit their wives. And 67% had used cocaine with the alcohol. So is the cocaine a contributor to the violence is the question. And the answer is probably yes. Cocaethylene is also more likely to induce heart conduction anomalies that may lead to a heart attack. This substance has a half-life 3 times that of cocaine, and therefore can cause prolonged high blood pressure, which of course can result in a heart attack. While the brain gains feelings of euphoria and well-being from cocaine, the heart is being abused by this substance. Cocaine causes the heart rate to increase and the blood vessels to constrict, raising blood pressure 20 to 30 units. Small muscle repair stops during this use. The stress on the heart and the muscle damage being done by its use can cause damage to the heart muscle, coronary arteries, and other blood vessels of the heart. Prolonged high blood pressure weakens blood vessel walls in the brain, leading to a stroke. Cocaine also causes a curious condition where the calcium in fat deposits collect in blood vessels, causing heart attacks and strokes. Okay, so probably the worst thing you can do is snort cocaine, because it may cause you to have heart problems. And if you have a healthy heart, it's going to make it unhealthy. You're going to start collecting calcium and fat deposits in your arteries, whereas before, of course, you weren't going to do that. Cocaine crosses the placental barrier, meaning that when mom uses, her fetus uses also within seconds. Damage is done to the fetus's blood vessels in a similar reaction to that of the mother, and may result in miscarriage, stroke, placental separation, or SIDS, or the baby dies soon after birth. And nobody knows why. Sudden infant death syndrome. One study looking at 717 babies born to cocaine-using mothers found that they were born on an average 1.2 weeks early, 1.2 pounds lighter, 1 inch shorter, a head that is 3/4 of an inch smaller in circumference. And if you look at a baby's head, 3/4 of an inch is quite a bit. The babies are born agitated, irritable, with high blood pressure. The baby is usually malnourished because that is the lifestyle of the cocaine and amphetamine user. She's malnourished, so the baby's malnourished. Now the reality is the baby usually takes from the mother no matter whether the mother's got it or not. The baby will just suck off as much stuff as a baby possibly can. But in this case, because of the malnourishment of the mother, the baby doesn't have any food or nourishment to suck off of the mother, to drain off of the mother. And so the baby has all of these interesting problems.
So how do they treat the baby after the baby's born? Because they're born agitated.
They are. It's horrible. It is the worst possible thing in the world. Cocaine was real popular when I was working at Children's Hospital in Omaha. So when these mothers, of course they knew who they were, when these mothers gave birth to these cocaine-addicted babies, we would get them right away. And if they survived the birthing process, because there's a lot of horrible things that can happen to the baby. Where was it? Yeah. All of this stuff is possible with the baby. So the baby can be born, usually they're miscarried, okay? Because they're not living in an environment that is conducive to health. So normally the baby's miscarried at some point. But if the baby makes it, a lot of times they're born with a stroke. That means their brains are already blown out. There's a section of the brain that's dead. Sometimes the placenta will separate from the uterine wall. And then, of course, they get another, this is another form of spontaneous abortion. If they are born, then they are born agitated. They're born with a lot of problems.
Do they get treated with medication or anything?
How can we treat them? What are you going to do? How much cocaine are you going to give these kids? You might overdose them. If you underdose them, it's not going to make a difference. No, we don't treat them. We let them go cold turkey. Now the problem is because they're agitated, they can't sleep. They have insomnia because they're crackheads. The babies are. So these babies stay up all the time and they cry constantly. And the cry is one of pain, and it sounds like a cat that's caught somewhere and it's screaming to get out. And that's exactly what the baby sounds like. It's so irritating to the personnel that you can't stand to be in the room with that baby for longer than 15 minutes. It's just too irritating. Is this making you sick? Is this the most horrible thing you've ever heard?
I've seen it before, it's like in California, and was it Compton? There's Snoop Dogg's grandmother ran a daycare, and the daycare is like a free daycare, or mainly she helps people low incomes and stuff. And one of the babies that was there was addicted to meth. And the baby was like, was jittery and agitated and
Never slept,
crying, screaming.
couldn't get it to eat, it was crying so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it sounded like a cat screaming.
Yeah, and that's what I was just wondering, like, what do they, like, do they usually treat them, or they just let them be?
There's no way we can treat. My nephew, great nephew, was born heroin addict, and it took him 6 weeks to come off of heroin, and it cost like $500,000 to treat him. State of India, don't worry, the state of India. My family didn't have to pay for it. Yeah, a lot of times these kids don't survive. Obviously that one did. My grandson did, or my great nephew did. Anyway, yeah, a lot of times they don't survive, but they sound like a cat. So what would happen? They'd start pulling nurses and technicians off of other floors because and they'd rotate us through. So every 15 minutes they'd change crews, and you'd go in there. Of course, the other problem is that they're irritating all the other babies. Now normally they can't afford a private room, but sometimes they'll give them a private room anyway, just so that they get them away from the other babies. A lot of times they put them in CCU, or they put them someplace isolated in the hospital, and they just keep rotating people through. And you do whatever you can for the baby, but sometimes they don't make it. A lot of times they don't make it. So a lot of times they have other problems as well, especially strokes. The strokes is huge. So it's pretty ugly, and you want to just pop the mother in the face.
Yeah.
But you never do. I mean, you never hit the mother, and she's never there anyway. If it's a vaginal birth, and she left like 2 days after the baby was born, and a lot of times she doesn't come back. It's sad. Escaping from cocaine-soaked placental environment does not remove the child from danger. Stimulant users are often inattentive and uncaring, and the needs of others, about the needs of others, and this includes their infants, which results in emotional deprivation for the child, neglect of the child, bonding problems. Of course, this lady's not going to bond with anybody because the only important thing to her is her addiction. Studies show that the rates of mental delays are double among stimulant-exposed children. All is not bleak. With concentrated postnatal care, these infants catch up with their peers by toddlerhood. Toddlerhood is 1.5 years, so there you go. Tolerance of the euphoric effect begins with the first usage of cocaine. Increased usage has been seen of 25 times the level within days. So you snort a select amount of cocaine the first time, within days you're using 25 times as much as you were before. This is due to the adaptation of the brain to the dopamine stimulation in the nucleus accumbens. Tolerance is to the euphoric effect only, since paranoia increases, as does cardiovascular effects. So the more cocaine you're snorting, and of course people aren't smart enough to figure this out, they just keep using more and more and more and more, trying to get the same effect. Withdrawal from cocaine use is very real, despite the misperceptions of researchers into the 1990s. All the crash symptoms become accentuated and prolonged depending on the dosage usage, the dosage used, frequency of use, and the length of use. Anhedonia is a real serious problem. They can't be happy. They lack energy. They're lethargic. They're emotionally depressed because, of course, cocaine makes you feel euphoric. They have lost their motivation. They tend to be anxious. They have vivid and unpleasant dreams, and this is usually the reason or the excuse they use for using again. They keep having these bad dreams. And because they have the bad dreams, they can't stand them, and so they start using again. They, of course, are suffering from insomnia, increased appetite, psychomotor agitation, intense craving for the drug. And it is quite intense.
Cycle of quitting and relapse of stimulants. After a binge session with the drug, the individual crashes, sleeps for a prolonged period, awakens with renewed energy, and swears off the drug forever. The individual feels better for a few days and begins to feel as if they did before they began using the drug. They start feeling normal. And for this reason, they didn't think that cocaine was addictive. 7 to 10 days after quitting, the craving starts to build, energy levels drop, emotional depression sets in as they can find no pleasure in their surroundings. After a couple of weeks or a month, they relapse, not being able to deal with the depression or the ever-increasing craving. And this is one of the reasons why getting off of cocaine takes professionals to get you off of it. If you try to do it cold turkey, the probability of you staying off the drug is fairly remote. While cocaine overdoses are common, because of the rapid metabolization, the effects are rarely fatal. In large city emergency rooms in 2004, 41% of the visits were due to cocaine usage because most because the individual felt as if they were dying. They feel like they're having a heart attack, and of course their heart rate is very, very rapid. Maybe they're having heart palpitations, and for that reason they feel like they're having a heart attack. So they'll usually go in, and of course you just sit them down, you give them you try to lower their blood pressure with medication. Once their blood pressure is lowered, then they feel fine and they leave. The U.S. averages between 2,000 to 3,000 stimulant deaths every year, either from the initial stimulatory stage that causes seizures, hypertension, hyperthermia, stroke, or tachycardia. Or later with the depression stage, from extreme respiratory depression and coma. Some people will experience inverse tolerance, where they become more sensitive to cocaine's effects, and of course, they're more likely taking too much and overdosing. Long-term cocaine amphetamine usage can lead to tactile hallucinations called formications. This is a lot of fun, because what happens is they feel like they've got bugs crawling all over them, crawling in and out of their skin. It's really kind of funny. The user will sometimes scratch themselves bloody, trying to rid themselves of the imaginary pests. And of course, this is what we see with people taking crystal meth. They'll have a special area that they scratch, and they'll scratch it until their skin is gone. Or maybe on their face. They'll scratch a hole in their cheek. As much fun as that is. Or they'll pick at their eyebrows until they picked off all of the hair on their face. For this reason, a lot of individuals that use crystal meth or snort cocaine, they'll shave their bodies. Yeah, Johnny's starting to scratch already. Okay, whatever. They'll shave all the hair off their bodies. So they shave themselves bald. They shave all the hair off their arms. They'll shave off all the hair off their legs. I had let me see, it was my niece's husband. And one day he came to our house to visit, and he had shaved every hair off his body. At least that's what he said. I could see his arms. He was wearing shorts, and he'd shaved his legs, he'd shaved his arms, his head, he'd shaved his head. He didn't have any beard whatsoever. And it looked like he had shaved every hair off his body. And I said, I asked him, well, why in the world would you do that? Of course, I've been teaching this class for, 15 years, 20 years. I've been teaching this class for 20 years, so I know what it means when you shave all the hair off your body. And he said, I'm trying to lose weight. And I said, are you swimming? He said, no, I can't swim, but I run. And I said, so you shaved all the hair off of your body so that you could run? He said, yeah. Of course, he's all agitated and everything. Yeah, like I didn't know what was going on. Eventually, this guy killed himself. And the way he did it was he overdosed. He had a heart attack. My mother died. Are you ready for this? My mother died, and she gave all of her grandchildren $20,000. Each of her grandchildren. She had 12 of them. Everybody got $20,000. And guess what he did with the $20,000 that his wife just inherited? Yeah, he bought some good stuff, is what happened. He bought some good stuff. And when he used the good stuff, he was using crystal meth before. And then he started using cocaine, had a heart attack, and died at 39. As strange as that sounds. Sad story, isn't it?
Strangest things people do.
I know. And of course, I knew all along that this kid was using. And his wife was just going, no, he would never do that. Oh no, I'm with him all the time. He doesn't have, I know that he's not using. The hell he's not using. Yeah, he just shaves himself for fun. Exactly.
I know he wanted to lose weight, but why could you?
And he was skinny as a minute.
The whole point of the body hair and all the integumentary system is to sweat, and that's where, isn't it? To protect your body.
Yes, to protect your body, sure.
And then they say when a person sweats a lot, it kind of.
You can lose weight that way. That's a real hard way to lose weight. But he would shave so that he didn't have formication, so he didn't pick it himself. He was a nursing assistant. He knew all this stuff, and he knew that I knew, so he stayed away from it. If he knew that I was at my parents' house, he wouldn't come over because he didn't want me to see him. His wife was complete, and she still is to this day. She won't admit that she thinks he had a heart attack at 39. Yeah, right. Okay. Cocaine and amphetamine usage may also cause dental problems for the user. This is usually caused from poor nutrition, poor dental hygiene, and the acidic effects of the drug. The individual also tends to suffer dehydration that causes the gums to recede. Seizures are sometimes caused by excessive cocaine or amphetamine usage. 2 to 10% of cocaine users will have seizures, 3 times more women than men. Why? Why more women than men? Why are they having seizures and men don't have seizures? This is a circulatory situation. That's what cocaine does. It affects your circulatory system. Women have less blood than men do. Women's circulatory systems tend to be smaller than men's circulatory systems. So them using the same amount of cocaine will cause more problems for them, to the point of seizures. Cocaine and amphetamine users can sometimes suffer from gastrointestinal problems, gastric ulcers, retroperitoneal fibrosis, visceral infarction, intestinal ischemia, gastrointestinal tract perforation, colonic ischemia. These are all really serious problems. These are holes in your digestive tract. These are dead spots in your digestive tract. These are hardening of areas in your digestive tract. And this can cause all kinds of interesting problems. Because you have some of these problems, you may potentially develop a cancer. Another possible side effect of cocaine usage comes from dopamine changes in the cerebellum from cocaine or amphetamine toxicity. The individual suffers from involuntary writhing, flailing, jerking, or sinuous movements of the arms and legs. This is sometimes referred to as meth or crack dancing. That sounds like something that people should do. Let me see if this works. Wait a minute. Oops. Wait a minute. Let me go back. Let me try it again. Wait a minute. Okay, go back. Let me see. Okay, copy. Paste. Let's see if this works. Oh, it's gonna work.
We have is claimed by the plaintiff that the defendant is obligated to her for failure to pay back rentals, utilities, and also for the cost of a, DNA paternity test the 2 of them engaged in. Apparently the 2 of them have taken the test and directed that it be furnished to me for my inspection with whomever. Well, in other words, if he's not the father, then she pays. If he is the father, she gets paid. That's good. That's good. That ain't bad.
Watch her
Well,
and watch him.
Chill. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Your Honor. Judge O'Brien. You know how to act better. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I ain't trying to show out. Would you stop? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, I'll try not. Can you hold still or are you under the influence? Hey, not right now. But that woman now, she done drove me to influence a lot of things that I said I never did.
You gonna lie?
Oh, can I? What is the truth? God knows. I wouldn't bring him into it.
Are you please?
How would you take care of him if officially you're unemployed? What's the
Thank you.
source? Unemployed then?
You are
I went unemployed then.
Yes, you
When I
were.
was selling dope.
Excuse me, Your Honor.
Selling dope.
He was doing that, but he was receiving his daughter some security checks for her mother's death. And he wasn't giving me none like that.
Everybody, excuse me, were you let him go? I'll tell you the truth. Tell the truth. Okay, just let him go. I have you were showing a classic example, all that kinetic. I'm sorry. Too much energy. I'm sorry, but it's hard for you to show the residual effects from. So you've already said that you were moving merchandise. I'm not denying. I'm here to tell the truth. No, didn't I say? Didn't I raise my right hand? I don't care who is the truth. The only one that condemn me is God. But Your Honor, you may get a little remark. He worked up in mysterious ways. Don't. Yes. See, does. He works for you right now. Whatever you decide. You candidly admitted that you've been moving merchandise. Oh, hey, Arkansas know it. Who don't know it? When's the last time you've been selling? I ain't sold no dope in a long time, Your Honor. I've been smoking dope, and the reason why. You want to know the reason? For 38 years, I said I never smoked no dope. For 38 years. But I tell you, I found out one thing. Never say what you want. Do something to the good. In my experience, he is actively under the influence. He's a crackhead. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I used to be the guy. Not at first. Now the impression, this is a nice, interesting little thing on a TV show. He's under oath. He is, in fact, a retired deputy sheriff. Excuse me, the testimony you hear that you give is under oath, subject to penalties of perjury. There you go. And what I have here is a confession by somebody that looks like they're still on extended parole as a habitual offender. After having a long... I've been out of the joint a long time ago. Not long. The last 3 years you got was imposed January 15, 1998. That make you released 2001. That was a Class C felony. That was...
I guess you saw him dancing around. He couldn't stop. He couldn't control himself. That's crack dancing. And you can see people on the street doing this. Of course, they've got the same problem that guy had. Anyway, okay, so that's what crack dancing looks like. They can't control themselves. They're very talkative. He kept interrupting the judge, which was the dumbest thing in the world he could possibly do. Schizophrenia is caused from too much dopamine in the mesolimbic pathway. It is normally caused by a hereditary imbalance or a disease state that affects this area. Since cocaine and amphetamines increase dopamine in this area, it can trigger stimulant-induced paranoid schizophrenia. The main effects are auditory, visual, or tactile hallucinations, especially tactile hallucinations, and paranoid delusions. Stimulant-induced psychosis is impossible to differentiate from organic psychosis. Psychotic symptoms may disappear with abstinence, but it may take hours, days, or even months before these psychotic instances or symptoms go away. This individual thought she was Hispanic. I told you the story. She thought she was Hispanic. She thought her father had murdered her mother and had buried the lady in the backyard. The police of Great Falls dug up the backyard. She said that her mother was in The reality was, of course, she was having a psychotic episode, and she had just used crystal meth the one time since she had gotten back. Where she just had visited her father's funeral, the one that she said had murdered her mother. Her mother was still alive, of course. And here she is trying to speak Spanish. She was an Aleut and drove on. She was certainly not Hispanic at all. She didn't speak Spanish, but she made vocal inflections as if she were speaking Spanish. And for that reason, of course, she had a psychotic episode. And later, the police released her. And she came back to school, and she told me the story. And I said, you can't do this again. You've already been kicked into this psychotic episode once. The next time you may not come back. You may think that you're a Hispanic lady for the rest of your life. She had 2 little boys. Yeah, I know. And that's what kept her from using again, from using the crystal meth again. As sad as that is. Okay. See, it's not time yet. I know, everybody's leaving. What's going on? Psychotic symptoms may disappear. Okay, 1/3 to 1/2 of chronic cocaine users will develop mild transient paranoia. With repeated use after a psychotic episode, smaller and smaller doses will trigger psychotic episodes. And actually, that was the second psychotic episode she had had. She had used crystal meth at one point. She'd gone out with her friends, and she started speaking Spanish to them. Well, she didn't think anything about it. She thought it was a joke. And then the next time she used, it didn't take very much to kick her into that psychosis again. This time she was in a psychotic, she had a psychotic episode that lasted for 2 days. And of course, if she had ever used again, she may be in a mental hospital now. I don't know. The last I heard, she was okay. Polydrug use is very common among cocaine users because the individual may need chemical assistance to come down off of their stimulation. Sometimes this kind of stuff really scares these people. So they'll use a barbiturate to try to come down. They'll smoke marijuana trying to come down. They'll drink alcohol thinking that it's a depressant, therefore it will help me. It doesn't. It actually increases, it creates that cocaethylene in the stomach, and that is 3 times stronger than the cocaine or the alcohol. The most common drugs used with cocaine are alcohol, heroin, sedative hypnotics, and nicotine. A person who smokes cigarettes is 22 times more likely to use cocaine than a non-smoker. While the purity of cocaine coming into the country averages 80 to 90%, most marketed cocaine has been cut with substances to increase profits. Baby laxatives, can you imagine? Snorting something with baby laxatives in it, and it gives you, the runs. Oh, well. Baby laxatives, lactose, vitamin B, aspirin, mannitol, sugar, tetracycline, tetracaine or procaine. Injecting any drug is dangerous, but injecting street drugs is especially dangerous. The user can never be sure of the purity of the drug. The drug may be contaminated with dangerous substances that are not meant to be introduced into the human body. Rat poison, they've cut it with rat poison before. All kinds of interesting things. Anything that powders, they'll use to cut their cocaine. Bacteria and viruses may be introduced. 50 to 90% of IV drug users are infected with hepatitis C from using contaminated needles. Half to 90% of them have hepatitis C. So when you see these hepatitis C commercials on television, who are they talking to? Well, they're probably talking to this group of people right here. They were so cool when they were using cocaine back in the day. But now, of course, they've got hepatitis C, they've got all kinds of interesting health problems, and now they want to get rid of their hepatitis C. Cocaine's enduring effect is that it causes compulsive use by its users. They may be using compulsively to recapture the initial rush, but they are probably not going to find it. No matter how much they use, they're not going to get the same rush that they had before. They may be trying to avoid the crash. They are seeking to avoid life's problems, of course. They may be trying to control symptoms of depression. This individual used the last time because her father had died, and she was very upset that he had died. So what does she do? She uses crystal meth. And all it did was make her problems even more severe. Of course, she wasn't thinking of her children. She had 2 little boys at home, but she wasn't thinking about them. She was only thinking about herself. They may be trying to control symptoms of depression. People may have a hereditary predisposition to use. The brain has been restructured to create an intense craving for the individual. Therefore, they have to continue using the cocaine. Smokable cocaine or crack or freebase cocaine wasn't normally smoked until the 1980s. In 1981, a sudden glut of cocaine powder caused the market to collapse. Drug entrepreneurs in the Bahamas decided to concentrate the powder into chunks or rocks and resell the pieces at a low price. The easiest means of ingesting the new crack cocaine was to smoke it. Before, you didn't really smoke cocaine. You couldn't smoke cocaine, but you can smoke the rocks. If you try to smoke cocaine, of course, the heat will destroy the psychoactive substance in the cocaine. But as a rock, of course, you can actually smoke the cocaine. Freebasing followed, and a cheap drug spread across the United States. Freebasing is where they take an accelerant, usually ether, and they cook the cocaine, the crack cocaine, in the ether, and the ether is highly flammable, and then and it actually cooks away it'll cook away any other substance that's in the cocaine. If they cut it with, I don't know, baby laxatives or whatever, it'll cook that away, and then they get a really good hit of the cocaine. Who's the guy, the comedian? He was freebasing. Well, they were Ricky Nelson. You guys don't know who this is, but Ricky Nelson was freebasing in his plane as they were taking off. The ether, he was freebasing with ether. Ether is a really interesting substance. If you pour it on the table, it will seek the lowest point and it will run off the table. So if you have ether in a room, it's usually goes to the floor. And that's what happened. So they're freebasing, and of course they're freebasing with ether, and the fire started, and of course it was on the floor, and it went from the freebasing can to the floor, and it spread throughout as they were taking off, of course. So now we've got gravity moving all this ether down to the back of the plane, and it was on fire, and the plane blew and killed everybody on the plane. As exciting as that is. Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor was the one. He was freebasing cocaine, and he sucked it down. It's heavy, so he sucked it down into his lungs. It got into his lungs. It started on fire, and the fire just went down into his lungs. They thought he was going to die, but of course he survived. He burned his mouth. He burned all the skin off of his face. Really kind of cute. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time. We'll talk more about burning people's faces off, blowing up airplanes. And
That's crazy.
that's nuts. I know, all for a good time. Yeah, that's stupid. It's just stupid. I told you I had no happy stories for you, except the funny story about my wife. It wasn't that funny. It wasn't funny to me, okay? You guys might have thought it funny. Anyway.
All right, see you, Bruce.
We'll see you, Johnny. Take it easy. Oh, I have to turn this off.